and welcome to the Hello Judges podcast, sponsored by Taylors of Harrogate. My name is Will Woodhouse-Banks and I love coffee competitions. This episode is also sponsored by Sensit London. You can check them out at sensitlondon.com. My guest this week is Deanna Johnston Ledezma. Deanna has competed in and judged pretty much all of the competitions. We chat about her history and experience from both sides of the judges' table, and it's a really interesting conversation. I think you'll get a lot out of it. On the first sip of this podcast, you'll get notes of pomegranate and honeysuckle. On the second sip, as it cools down, you'll taste stewed fruits and dark chocolate. Please enjoy. Hello.
Gosh, you came out on my speaker. Hold on. Hold on. Oh, I was listening to music and it, bear with me while I make coffee at the same time. How are you?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, busy, but in a good way. Can't complain.
What coffee are you brewing?
I'm brewing your coffee. I saved it for.
Very exciting. Amazing.
Yeah, I was like, I want to save this, and then we're gonna brew it when we chat. Because I was like, I had it already in the freezer, and I was like, oh, I should just use that since we're doing this. Great.
And of course, it's the same coffee that came third in the World Championships with Claire.
Crazy exciting, right?
Yeah.
I'm actually looking forward to celebrating on this Thursday? Big little party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I won't be able to make it.
I was going to say, are you down for that?
No, we were in London last week, so if it was just like 1 week earlier, I would have been able to go, but never mind.
Fair enough. Oh, it'll be good. It's worth celebrating. I mean, I feel like such an incredible accomplishment, and just watching Claire in her journey has been incredible for me, because obviously Claire and I go back to like Scotland days when I was up and working in Glasgow,
right?
And she was at Brew Lab, and so to watch her compete and kind of very similar to that Dale Harris story of just like that persistence and competing every year, and staying in a way, she's kind of like a sleeper car, right? Because everyone knows she's good, but she's not the one to go out and like hit all the drums all day about it, right? So it's been really cool to just see her like just go and just get there,
Yeah, it was amazing to see it with Claire as well, because she went like step by step. Like she was third, then she was second, then there was no way she wasn't going to win it this year. Yeah,
and she's one of those competitors that has a real natural. She's herself on stage,
Yeah.
And I love that, because everything competition is performative, right? There is a performative aspect to it. Obviously, we rehearse a routine over and over again, and at some stage you even go, "Do I sound like I'm rehearsed?" But Claire manages to somehow be really herself, and I've always really enjoyed that, because when I sit down, from the judging perspective, sitting on that side of the table, I feel like really just like I can just sit and enjoy it. Like I can just sit and listen and enjoy. And it doesn't feel performed. It doesn't feel like it's been rehearsed 20,000 times, in the best way, not in the other way. It feels like put together, but it feels fresh.
Did you get to judge Claire on both days, on the semis and the finals? Yeah. I was watching her semis like from the audience, and when I saw her like not give the judges water, I like felt like an instant panic. I was like, oh my god.
Yeah. From what actually I think I might have judged only her finals when I think about it, because I judged both of your rounds. I know that, but now it's all blurred, so much judging. But I do know that from what we felt is like the finals, she just taking it to the next level, which is always a great way. If you're going like that, you're like, okay, cool. So that's good. Yeah,
it was a huge jump, because I think looking back on the semi-final score sheets, like because of that like mistake with not serving the water, like she had not scored so great, but she'd made it through to the finals, and then she just absolutely smashed it on finals day.
Yeah, and I think again, when we look at her in the world, it's been really cool as well. Like when I've been like messaging her in between things and stuff, and she's like, I felt really good today. I remember when she was semis, I think she was saying about, she's like, or maybe it was fine, I can't remember. She was like, I felt really good today. I felt really happy with what I did. You know what? It doesn't matter. if I get through the finals, I think she said, or something like that. She was like, because I just feel like I went out and did everything I could and I felt proud of it. And I'm like, in my head, I was like, that's usually how you feel when you're getting it to finals though. So that's great. You know? So that was exciting to see. And obviously her persistence and her kind of dedication. I mean, I've had the pleasure of being at one of her practice rounds after she won, kind of prepping into, and so I spent, like, I was there for a Saturday while she was running through, I think it was 2 weeks before she was leaving. Yeah. So it was also really cool to see kind of that kind of process organically move from the stage and into the next realm of like this assembly space where we're all trying to figure out, okay, so how do you score more points? And it was great for me too, right? Because at that stage I was like, sweet, we're done with the nationals. I can actually tell you loads of stuff. So
yeah,
you know, and that's really nice when you're judging and you're kind of sitting there going, oh, if they could understand that, they would, like, there's these things that they could think about that could help them, but I can't say it right now because we're in the middle of it. You know?
Yeah.
So
yeah. I suppose we're probably just a few months away from it all kicking off again, right? Because we've got the World Championships in Athens, at World of Coffee.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, I'm also like really looking forward to like a World of Coffee in Greece. Sounds nice.
Yeah.
I haven't been to Athens since the first barista camp. I was at the first barista camp and I was in Athens.
What year was that?
Oh my gosh, that was, yeah, I was there. And like, it's really funny because that's where I met a lot of people that I didn't realize I met in the industry. It only came about because they did like a special feature a couple of years ago and we all had interviews, like people from that kind of original, the OG. And I was like, oh yeah, that's where I met that person. That's so weird, you know? But yeah, the competition's coming up. We'll have some rounds coming in again with BCs, and I guess, you know, it probably feels faster or kind of really like soon also because we had like 2 years and change of nothing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's suddenly, whoa, how's that already happened? Whereas before then we kind of got used to that feeling of like the last round of something ends and then it's the start again, you know? But it's exciting, isn't it? So yeah. Are you gonna compete again?
Am I going to compete again? No. Well, I'm not going to say no, but I'm not going to compete again this year.
Right. Fair. Yeah.
I'm not going to do barista this year. I might have a crack at something else. Who knows? We'll see.
Nice.
See how I feel.
Yeah.
Because like with competitions, I feel like I need to have a really good reason to do it. Like if I can convince myself that I've got something interesting to say or something I want to like put across, then I can really get into it. But if I'm just doing it for the sake of doing it, I don't think I'd be as successful.
I genuinely relate to that. I understand that, like through my competition journey, like that's kind of, and what that thing is changes obviously, right? Like when I was at the beginning of my journey, what that meant in terms of like the reason to compete in something is very different from, let's say, me going into something now, right? But it definitely has to be there, right? So I completely relate. By the way, this is tasting great.
Excellent.
So I'm really happy that that's still tasting fantastic. Yeah. So well done.
We've got some of it in the freezer, and we've just silently re-released it on our website. I'm going to send an email out at the end of the month, like shouting about it because it's delicious, and why not?
I feel like it tastes better. I feel like it tastes even nicer. I'm like, how is that possible? Because I remember this coffee, like when I think about your round, and when I was tasting your espresso, and I remember like tasting it. I remember that was really funny. So semifinals, I'm like, let's stir the espresso, and like, you know, just done a few. Like this is nothing. It's new, not a new rodeo. And I take a sip. I take the first sip, and I'm like, what? But I have to keep a really dead face, right? Like, like smiling but not smiling. But I take a sip, the second sip, and I'm like, oh, if there was a definition of sweetness in coffee, that's there.
Yeah.
Which was great, right? So yeah, tasty
I never saw my score sheets from the semi-finals, but I'm pretty sure the espresso was better on semi-finals day.
I can confirm that.
Yeah,
I can confirm that your semi-finals espresso blew me out of the water. I was like, this is beautiful. It was very sweet. The balance between this, you know, when you look at the taste balance, like when we think about taste experience as a thing, it was a really great example of it. When people when they get their score sheets back and they see like comments like, you know, taste experience 3 or 3, whatever. And they're like, bitterness slightly high and pointed, would have liked more sweetness or things like that. And they're like, coffee, how do you make it sweet? I was like, your coffee was a very good example of what we mean when we mean like sweetness balancing out and harmonizing an acidity. It was great. Yeah, it was a great example. I was like, can we just bottle this espresso and put it in a capsule, like a little bottle, and then we can actually show people and calibrate other judges that would be amazing.
It would be awesome.
Yeah.
So I suppose we kind of organically got into everything, and we didn't like have like an introduction. So you are the founder of Sense at London, COO at Saint Espresso and Roastery.
Yeah, so the two Saint Espresso and Saint Coffee Roasters are kind of like sister companies, but they are part of the same group. So I kind of look after both. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're the current reigning UK roasting champion still.
Yeah.
Still holding it.
Yeah, I'm quite enjoying that.
And then, 2019, 2018, we've got second place, third place in Brewers Cup. You had a third place in Coffee and Good Spirits in 2017.
Yeah.
And UK sensory judge.
I am actually, this last year I've been starting to be migrated, or what do you call it, put into head judging role now as well.
Excellent.
So I've been, for example, in Coffee Good Spirits, I did a bit of head judging on the semis, and then I did some of the kind of sensory judging on the finals, did a bit of head judging on the Brewers Cup. So that's been a really nice transition outward and kind of into the next stage, I think.
Excellent.
Different experience in a way, but really great. Yeah. So
amazing. So thinking back, maybe it was 2017, maybe it was earlier. How did you first get started in competing?
Yeah. That's really funny. So I started, I think the first time I ever competed in something sensory based, right? 'Cause I'm competitive, so I've done other things. Was probably like back in 2000, 10 or 11, and it was at like a Pete's Coffee and Tea, and it was something kind of within the kind of internal of it. And I remember that was the first time, I tried to like make something look pretty on a cappuccino and this whole thing. That would have been like the first time, but not necessarily like a super memorable time, more like the first time the concept of making a routine with drinks came about. The first time I got hooked into competition, I'd say, as a result of actually also winning one, was not a coffee one. It was a wine competition.
Okay.
So back in Scotland, I was in St. Andrews. I was working in and kind of was looking after a place called Mitchell's Deli. It was part of a larger chain, but like the focus was on doing coffee and wine and food and things like that. It was cool. I was doing a master's degree over at St. Andrews. So that is why I was also in St. Andrews.
Right.
And I'd always kind of grown up with interest in wine and had already kind of learned a little bit from my mom. So I started to get really into it because of the access I had to the knowledge and the information. And the company did this competition with a wine buyer, I guess you could say, called Inverarity Vaults. And the wine buyer had done this whole like, okay, we're going to do a big competition. It's a 5-stage competition. If you win, we're going to take you with us to buy wine and champagne for like a 3 or 4 day trip. And I was like, ooh, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
So this was the first time I'd done it. So I kind of prepped up this whole thing. And there's the 5 stages where like you had to do one stage, which was presenting a bottle of wine as you would as a somm at a table, right? Another one was you had to create a 5-course menu concept with 5 wines. Another part of it was that you did a blind tasting, and you had to you did reds and then you did whites, and you had to kind of break that down and look at that from the kind of W set analysis of it. Then you had this like theory knowledge test. Yeah. And then the final bit was like the scary part, because it was basically the part where they could ask you any questions. So you sat in a room with like 4 wine experts, and they start asking you questions, and you've got to like answer it. And it was really exciting. And I remember I was like, oh, I don't care how this would be great. So in my head, because obviously somehow my brain just works differently than other people, I was like, 5-course meal. Yeah, cool. So I cooked the 5 courses. I brought them to the thing. I had brought someone with me, and I said, can I have an assistant? They're like, why? And I was like, to serve you the dishes. And they're like, you cooked all 5 dishes. And I was like, well, how are you going to actually taste? And how are you going to perceive this? I've done Mexican. Like, none of you guys have tasted real Mexican.
Yeah.
They're like, fair enough. So I serve them this 5-course meal with 5 wines. And obviously what happens? Well, after the 5 rounds, I win probably because the stomach always wins, you know, people, the route to their heart, right? But I ended up winning the competition and getting sent to Champagne. And I think after that, my love for sensory and competition just kind of solidified, right? Because the passion of the journey I had taken into wine really got hit home there, and sensory and pairing and what can happen in an experience, the passion towards competition, and then the experience of going to Champagne and experiencing some of the most incredible champagne houses and what happens at origin. And I'm pretty sure that was the catalyst to it all. Yeah, literally it all, like everything I do now. Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty intense way to get started. It sounds almost like the coffee masters of the wine world, how you described it.
Yeah, and it was funny because it was like a wine supplier meets the company. I mean, the company wasn't small. There was like 50 venues at the time, you know, but still, like, it was. But for me, it was exciting because it was like, oh, cool. There's like multi-stage, like there's an opportunity to learn. And I think for me, at the start of my competition journey in general, it was always about learning, right? It was always about saying, what can I learn, right? And then I think in my journey as it went along, it went, what can I challenge, right? So like, and that's kind of the interesting journey, right? And then like now it's more like, what can I create or discover?
Amazing. So thinking about you and the SCA competitions, are there any that you haven't entered? Like, have you done latte art?
I've entered everything. Some more, some less, have been less of a radar for me. I've entered everything. But yeah, 2017 was a really crazy year. So basically I'd competed in BCs in 2013, maybe 2014. I had done semis, 2013 or maybe 2014, 2015. And then I did Coffee and Good Spirits. And I'd realized that I had this weird problem. That's not so weird really, which is that I'd like go through a comp, I'd get like super into it, I'd do it, and then I wouldn't do where I wanted to do or as well as I wanted, and then I'd get like really down. And I'd sit there in my room and be like, oh, right? And then I'd freak out or whatever. And I'd understood there was something within the mental state of it. So I decided, I was like, well, what if I did go through a marathon and do every competition someone suggests to me or every competition that's out there in one season? And I thought, I'm sure this will create like a great mind state to be able to understand the root of competition, to see the correlations between them, to find new knowledge, but also to challenge myself to something that I know no one's really done. And it was almost a competition within myself at that stage, right?
Yeah.
That was also what was beautiful was the learning of like having to get up, dust yourself off from the fall and keep cracking on to the next one, right? Which I thought was a great discipline. So in 2017, I did 10 competitions in 9 months.
Wow.
Yeah, it was good. That was a crazy year too, because that was a year that I did make it to quarterfinals in Coffee Masters. I got the 3rd place position in Coffee and Good Spirits. I made semis in UKBCs, finals in Brewers, actually, I think that's the 3rd place year as well. There was like a crazy amount of things that happened that year. And at the same time, I had like a really terrible year in terms of having like not so nice guys dating, like break up with me right like 2 days before Coffee and Good Spirits, like a whole story around that.
You don't need that, not before competition.
No, I remember thinking like, surely you can just like, I know it's not great to live in an illusion, but could you just wait till like a couple days after, you know? But at the same time, it might have been like what I needed to like kind of get angry and like go, I'm gonna win this, or I'm gonna do well at this, because I'm like, you know what, fine.
Yeah.
And that was a crazy one because I had to create the routine in a day because I'd been so focused on trying to save the relationship. It was 2017. I was doing all the competitions in the world. I was the head of training for Taylor Street. So I was working quite a lot, building whole programs. I think I'd written like 18 courses for the company or something. And then he does this 2 days before. And that same time, I was meant to be prepping a routine. I was too focused on resolving a relationship. So when that happened, I just was laying in bed all sad. And someone I lived with called Kuba, he like pulls me out of bed and he's like, no, this is not the person I know. You get up and you're going to do this. And I was like, needed someone to give me a kick, right? And I got down to the training center and essentially built the routine for the semis in like 5 hours.
Yeah.
And built the drinks, and then didn't expect to get through, right? Obviously. It was about finishing. Got through, hear my name for finals, nearly cry. I'm shocked. And then I go, wait, I've got to make a routine. I don't have an Irish coffee. So we like had to run around and go get stuff, and like stayed up till 12 trying to do this to wake up the next morning to compete again. I mean, my coffee got stolen that time. There's a million things. It was crazy, but victorious indeed.
What a wild year.
Yeah. 2017. That was the beast year.
So thinking of like yourself and in competition, you sort of, you know, portray this image of being sort of really strong-willed and really like, you know, go get like take on any challenge. What sort of challenges have you faced in relation to being like, you know, in the minority, being a female competitor? What is your experience with that?
So the interesting thing for me is I've actually had insane amounts of support from people in general. And I feel like I've been lucky enough to not run into that. Now, part of that might just be my strong-willedness to be like, I'm doing this, right? That's totally possible. And that might be my tendency to just ignore the fact that I even think there's a reason why I shouldn't be able to just do it. And you know, and I think I'm surrounded by people like that who just are like, they wouldn't even think that because I am female, because I'm Latin American, it would even have an impact. So maybe because I'm surrounded by those people, I don't perceive any problem either. But I have been really lucky to have people who are in my life, not like crowds of people, you know, I'm kind of like a person who has like a smaller group of friends type of person, but who've been quite a lot of supportiveness around it. And so it's been pretty good. And in that sense, that's also where it's been really exciting to then see other, you know, and if other people in a similar kind of backgrounds and things kind of come into competition and be able to kind of be like, yeah, like you should do it too. It's really exciting. And I think one of the things for me that's been really key is that like to encourage others to compete or to kind of pursue their dreams or to be diligent across it and do those things. It's about me doing it too, because if I crack on, like people understand like, oh, they can crack on too, right?
Yeah.
And so I think I've focused more on getting out there and thinking about it not as any like I'm any different or any problem or any reason why I shouldn't be able to, you know. I think that's been quite powerful. Yeah,
absolutely. That being said, we are like an industry dominated by a large percentage of males. Do you have anything, or how do you think we can encourage greater diversity and, you know, in sign-ups and inclusivity in the competitions?
So I think one of the great things that is useful is kind of knowledge. So people who feel like who have already a support network that's very strong and they kind of have that kind of like, let's say, advantage of that network or of that support of those people around them will have access to a lot of information very easily, right? They'll know what's going to happen, what to expect from a competition, how it goes. I actually think a massive way, for an example, of competition that would be useful is to actually go around, for example, and do a small tour in different parts of the country and offer a little bit of insight into the rules for people, a little bit of like, here's the experience, here's what you know, here's what you're going to go and need to do, and support the people who maybe wouldn't feel like they could voice what they don't know yet.
Yeah.
Right. By just being present and going out there and, you know what I mean? Because like, it's a lot easier when you feel, if you're a person who feels like worried or scared or unsure if that's something you can do, right? It's hard for you to also feel like you can vocalize that and be like, hey, right? Because you feel like your voice is not very loud compared to everyone else's, right? So for people like ourselves who have done this and gone out there, I feel like it's important to try to go around and see if there's like some way to do a tour or something like that, give some insight on it, reach out and just be present as a resource. I think it's a huge thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Camilla from VA and Ollie Jones from Blossom Coffee Roasters, they're sort of trying to put together a bit of like a program to open things up for some people.
Absolutely. And a huge part of that I will say is part of it is people feel like they can do something when they see representation of someone similar to themselves sometimes. So having that kind of diversity in that kind of experience is key, right, for everyone.
Yeah.
Because if you see someone that you're like, if you feel like, you know, it can come from anywhere, right? Like I grew up in California. I grew up in a kind of community, Latin American community, but like a lot of my childhood, there was like a lot of like less privileged situations around me, and a lot of like the neighborhood that if I would have grown up and just kind of stuck to what I should have been, or what, you know what I mean, I could have got stuck in that mindset. So actually, like when I saw people succeeding who were in a similar neighborhood, it was actually really inspiratory to me go, oh no, like I don't have to be locked in because of like where I live, right? So I feel like there's always this with everything. When you see that someone else is pursuing their dreams and you can relate to them, it also inspires you to go ahead and give it a try, right?
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is just to remind people that like what happens with comp is people sometimes get focused on the win, but they forget what the win might mean for them. And if you realize as a person that your win might mean something different and you take that into case, then whatever you do, when you go out and do it, you're going to feel happy about it. So like allowing yourself to kind of find what it is for you rather than subscribing to the kind of general expectation of what winning means.
Yeah.
I think it empowers a lot of people who might not otherwise compete, you know?
I think that's a great piece of advice for first-time competitors. Like, you know, set your expectations, not to, you know, expect that you'll do badly, but to be realistic and what you can get from competing, like set that as your goal.
100%. I think if we look at like even just like what's happened with Claire and Rosa and the amazing job they've done, just kind of everyone surrounding someone to support them. I think if we also as a community think more about how we can do that, what skills can we like contribute to support people, and if we know someone might even be slightly like interested but scared to like put themselves out there, it might be an opportunity for you to be able to like, hey, look, you don't have to do it alone. Like I'm here, like we can chat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It could be huge. So yeah.
Great. So you've done all the competitions. Is there a particular one that you think would be good for somebody who's never done any competition before? Something that's, you know, for people who aren't so sure, maybe doesn't require as intense a preparation as Coffee Masters, for example?
Yeah. So interestingly, that depends on where you're coming from, right? Because on one hand, Coffee Masters requires multidisciplinary prep, but at the same time, you can kind of just rock up and do it, which is kind of cool about it. Well, you have to prep a signature drink, I mean, but you know, which is kind of cool in a way if you're like the type of person that likes a marathon, even if it's your first time. If you're like, yeah, like I just want to have fun. To be honest, Coffee Masters is so much fun that even if it's your first time, it's fun. So it can actually be quite a good one to go for if you just understand that it's like a circus. You know, the great one about that, and the reason why actually I would mention that one, is also because you don't have to form a presentation really, except for your SIG. You do kind of walk through it, but you're really just chatting with the judges. So some people might find that actually a lot more close to what they're used to doing in a cafe. And they might find that the easier entry, because they'll go, oh, wait, I can like just talk to the judge and they'll kind of ask me questions as well. So we can just chat. Okay, so some people might go, well, that I might forget what I'm going to say, but if they ask me the question, I'll know the answer. So that works.
Yeah.
Right? So it actually can be a really good entry level for someone who's kind of interested in doing that, if they can kind of understand it's a lot of fun and take it for that, really enjoy the time on stage. For someone that wants that kind of more like, oh, I'm actually really nervous about that concept, I'd prefer to prep myself up so I feel like I can just do that, I know what I'm doing. I think Brewer's Cup's actually a really nice one, because the pace is slower, because you're not making like 3 different drinks for 4 judges, right? You're doing one really nice brew. You can do that with a Clever Tripper. You can do that with a Kalita. You can do that with whatever you like. And you are focused just on talking about that coffee, that brew, and that experience. And I feel like the pace of that is really nice for someone coming into to competition. Also, you don't need to buy like 3 courses versus a kit. You know, you're not worrying about sourcing milk, coffee, signature, you know, all this stuff. You're looking at, let me source a coffee, let me find 3 brewers. And if you're absolutely beginning, you know, it's not, you don't need to think about, I mean, geishas and all that. You're trying to learn the process of competition, right? You're trying to learn the process. So you can pick whatever coffee you want. You can pick whatever 3 brewers. You could literally be like, hey, can I get 3 V60s? Ask 3 friends if you needed to, right? And you can do that one in a way of really learning a lot about presentation, competition, tasting, and expressing what you need to express to judges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I think with brewers, even just preparing for compulsory, like you challenge yourself to like, how can I make any coffee taste the best it can?
It's actually a very cool round in my idea as well, like in my thought process because of that, right? Because you're like, you're given a coffee and you're like, okay, we all have the coffee. We all have the same water. I mean, how many times you go backstage as a competitor, you're like, this water's not great. But you're like, but we're all in the same boat. So
yeah.
So fine. It's like a brew off, right? I agree. And I think you learn a lot. You learn so much about how to do what you'd normally be doing essentially in cafe and coffee world, which is taking the coffee and finding the most like optimum place that you can put it in the condition. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
What's your favorite competition as a competitor?
I toggle between masters and roasting for 2 different reasons. So Coffee Masters is awesome in terms of competing because it's so multidisciplinary, because you're on stage for long enough time to chill out, right? Because you get on there, you're like, oh, you're nervous, but you can't actually stay nervous for that long because you just kind of, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And funny things happen and the MCs say funny things and then eventually you're just laughing because judges are walking. I mean, I judge it now, so I'm one of the other side, but the judges walking around filming the random things you're doing and you know what I mean? It's funny and it's enjoyable. So in terms of that and in terms of having a good time, and in terms of like actually showcasing a set of skills, I think Masters is really fun. Plus there's a prize. Everyone likes a prize.
Everyone likes a prize.
In terms of like the SCA and generally like on an overarching, I love roasting. And I'll tell you why. It's not specifically about what you're going to do in the competition. Because actually what you do in roasting comp is not necessarily what people think it is. It's because you spend 3 days together with like 8, 10 other people, other roasters or people, because, you know, and you actually bond over this time because you guys all do your sessions and you all sit down, you have a pint together. And so by like day 3, when they're going to announce the winners, you're all like kind of thick as thieves, right?
Yeah.
It's actually the social aspect and the really exciting conversations that happen, like the really geeky conversations about roasting that no one else would want to hear, right? But because you're surrounded with like 8 or 9 other roasters, be like, oh, that's interesting. Let's talk about what happens when that happens in the RR, right? Like, it's really fun. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I guess roasting, was that the last competition you did before you transitioned to being a judge?
Yeah, so roasting, let's see, 2018 roasting, and I think I did the last competition I did, because it's roasting, I did Masters straight after that, because I went to do Los Angeles Masters. So that was crazy, because I went to do Masters, and then I flew from here to Los Angeles, did Masters, then flew from Los Angeles to Taipei and did, or maybe it was the other way around, and did roasting and then came back. It was one of the like around the world 3 competitions or something weird. And then I did do Brewers Cup for the 2nd place position I had in 2020, just before we all got locked down.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I was gutted about, obviously, because everyone's always like, oh, it's great to be 2nd, but you really want to be 1st. But you're like, oh, but then when the pandemic happened, I'm like, oh, I guess it's a good year to not win, because that'd be really annoying to be locked down as the winner.
Yeah.
You know. Bless Matteo, probably was sitting there going, when am I going to compete on stage? So that would have been, so technically the Brewers Cup would have been the last one I physically executed. They're all within like 3 months of each other. And then lockdown, and then, yeah, my transition into judging Masters. So this year's the 2nd year of judging Masters, and into SCA. I'd already started judging some SCA, but I'd been doing barista predominant at that stage. So yeah.
So what made you decide to switch places and go join the judging?
Yeah, so part of it was like, so there's a part of me that's like kind of like you. So it's like, if I compete now, there has to be like a really core thing I'm going to do. So it's not to say that I won't do it again, because there will be some that I'll go back to, right? Because I have plans, but they're big plans. So they need to cook, and they've been cooking, but they need to be executed now, right? So part of it's that. And so I wanted to take that time while those develop in my head to like look from a different perspective and widen my perspective. And then there's the massive part of that is, as a competitor, having been on the other side and having some frustrations, I'm not going to lie, from a competing side, and from looking at the fact that I felt like some clarity or some real commentary was needed to justify scores, and wanted to understand what was going on, and wanted to be one of those people that could maybe either understand what's happening and kind of go, okay, fair enough, I understand, and I can explain it to other people, or be part of the change, right?
Yeah.
And so I knew that going in. I was like, let's go in and let's start doing that. And as I started judging in barista and I started noticing things, I started to go, well, I'm going to be the judge I wish I would have had as a competitor, because that's now how I can support people who compete and can encourage them to come back, right? If I can be the person that gives them as many notes as possible, really honest feedback and supportive, feedback, then actually they'll come back again, or they'll get something out of that. And that's more important than anything. Actually, that's bigger impact than me standing on a stage and talking to you about something, most likely. Because it encourages more people, right? I can actually encourage more people to grow. So that's how it started. And that's quite literally been what the experience has been. And it's always, the biggest thing for me, is always makes me smile, is when a competitor, when I'm getting, like, they get them sheets back and then they come and they sit down with me and they're like, how do you write so much? They're like, I don't even need to ask any questions because it is all explained here. And I'm like, that's amazing. So like, if that's what's happening, I'm really happy. Now I'm going to sit here, and you can ask me anything you want after, but I'm going to sit here and be really happy that if my sheet tells you everything about the journey of my experience when I sat down, I'm doing exactly what I would want if I was competing. So I'm doing what I came to do as a judge.
Yeah. And I will 100% back you on that, because you judged my heats and my finals, and both times, like, I looked at my score sheets afterwards, and like, not just yours, like all the judges this year seems to be really on it. Like, I looked at the score sheets and I was like, yeah, no questions. Like, I understand what happened and where it could have been better. So I didn't really have any debrief because I didn't feel like I needed one.
Oh, that's so good. See, and that's where we want to be. And I mean, coming into it all, that was a big thing. And as I've been around now for a little while, I think I've been judging overall probably about 4 or 5 years, just different things, and kind of increasing the amount and moving forward. I started to kind of go into this kind of role of like guiding new judges, which then became an even new layer, right? Because you're like, oh, this is amazing. So now I can actually share my knowledge from competition and from judging with someone that maybe has never competed. So it give them some insight on what it's like to be on the other side as well, right? Because that's huge. That's huge for people who've never competed and they're judging. They're really nervous because they're like, I don't even know what it's like to be a competitor. And now I've got to, like, you know what I mean? They're nervous just like the competitors are. So to be a person that's able to guide them and help them find the words and the language to express what the experience is like is that next level of kind of like real excitement, right? Because now you're like, wow, I can now be a great like resource for more than just the competitor and more than just the, like, as a whole. I think that's where moving into the head judging position has been really cool, because on one hand, I love being a sensory judge and just going for the experience and experiencing the whole thing and tasting all of the layers. When you're a head judge, you're looking at across the team, you're supporting the team in their experience of it, right? So you, by shifting into a head judge role, you get less of the like individual experience, right? You're looking more at the collective and making sure that everyone has calibration, has support, but you're supporting the team to be able to do their job. So that transition's a new transition, which means you're ultimately supporting the competitor to have fair scoring, to have fair feedback. So in that way, it's really good. I think it's a really good journey for anyone interested in competition.
Excellent.
Do you have maybe not necessarily a favorite, but are there any memorable barista championship routines that you absolutely love?
Oh, that's a very good question. You know, and I'm sure there are. I mean, yes, but she won, Agnieszka. I remember I met Aga back in 2000, I don't even know, a while ago at the first Barista Connect, which is a really cool thing that happened quite a while ago. It was like a whole thing that was built to support women in coffee competing globally. And it was the first of its kind that I knew of. There was probably 8 or 9 of us on the first one. It happened in Denmark. Like Emmy Fukuhara was there. Like all of the people that have won pretty much were there, right? Michaela and Aga was there. So fast forward years later, I'm sitting in obviously this grandstand watching her compete in her finals routine. I hadn't gotten to see any of it up till then because I was trade showing, at DR Wakefield, you trade showing the people, and I'm sitting down watching this routine. And I swear to you, they didn't even have to tell me she'd won. I've been like, that is the best routine ever. Like with the whole way that she implemented perception of weight with this like magic trick around the like tables. And like, I was like, whoa, okay, you have to win. You have to win. Yeah, that was a standout routine for me.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those ones, like whenever I talk to people about competition, it tends to fall into like 2 categories. There's like routines that are based around like service and experience, and other ones that are based around like science and innovation and that kind of thing. And that's definitely like a really good key one for the service element.
100%. And I think that was exciting because there was a lot of science innovation, which is super cool. But when you get the other side, you're like, oh, it just shows you how important both things are in our industry, right? And the combination of that is what makes us exist in general. So I think, yeah, there was that. And then there was years ago, Michaela Brewer's Cup. I think she might have placed second in the world that year. I can't remember. She did a Brewer's Cup routine, Kalita waves, very simple recipe, very clean, simple, like very almost like gold standard. You're like 60 grams per liter thing, right? 55 grams per liter, like this kind of a thing. But the way she did it, that was so clean, so clear, and classic in terms of its methodology, but very friendly, again, service and experience, was just for me, like, this is an example of taking a routine that is simple, but done really well, consistently, and produced a great cup. And her coffee was it was a Kenyan. It wasn't like, she wasn't coming at you with like a geisha, right? So it was also cool because you're like, I mean, Kenyans are good, we know that, but still, you're just like, that is so cool. Like, you've taken a coffee, you've probably gone up against some pretty hardcore, green, and you've taken a very, like, what a barista would do in a cafe. And that's what she was talking about, right? And you've done it, and you've done this well into the worlds. This is so cool.
That's amazing. Yeah, definitely would like to see more sort of diversity in the choice of coffees in competitions. I think that's always quite exciting.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely. Even I think it was Milan when we had Martin Shabaya, the Kenyan barista champion, and he was obviously with the help of Sasha Sestic, but had Kenyan coffees in the World Barista Championship final. I thought it was awesome.
Oh, it's so good. I mean, and I think when I think about it, I haven't really used myself in my competition. I was on this kind of thing. I was using like washed coffees. I was very like, because all the new trends were coming in. Since I was a teenager, I've always been like, I'm not going with trends, right? So I was like, I'm going for a washed when everyone else is going for that one. And I'm going to have I think I did a Kenya. I did a Kenya, definitely. Because my Irish coffees were with Kenyan coffee, which was so fun.
Nice.
Yeah, I did do Sidra. I did Sidra for my Brewers Cup in 2020. It was a Sidra, but it was a wash Sidra. Yeah.
Where was that from?
That was from Colombia. So that was the Granja La Esperanza. They had done
nice.
Yeah, and that was the first, I think that was the first set of the Sidra. Because I was working in green, I tasted the first actual set of Sidra they'd done, which was the year before. And I was like, this is great. I was like, I need some. They're like, well, we don't really have enough because it was just the first harvest. And I was like, great, I want some next year. And so when it came through again, it was a really great opportunity to use it. And so Beth down at Kelowna, which Beth was at Kelowna at the time, had bought it, and I was like, great. So I want to use this. So I'm going to ask you to roast it. And it was, yeah. So, and that was the maybe the second time they'd released it or whatever. It was quite exciting. Super, super beautiful coffee. Yeah.
I remember, I think it was 2018, me and you both competed at the Leeds heat for the Barista Championships.
Oh gosh.
I was on first at like 9 a.m. I think you were either on second or third. And you used a honey processed red bourbon from Cafe Granha.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Granha has been in my heart for a while, actually. My first barista competition, the funny thing about it is, because I didn't understand the value of this at the time, right? I used a Gesha from Granja L'Esperanza. This was like back in 2013, it was 14. And I'd gotten it from Monmouth. Like back in the OG. Yeah. That's the start of the journey, and then went off from it. And there was a year where, that was my favorite thing to do. There was a year where I used 2 Rwandas. Everyone was like, what? You're going to do 2 Rwandas in barista championships? Do you understand how dangerous? And I was like, yep, rock and roll. So, but it was all about this talk. The whole conversation was I'd found 1 Rwanda from one producer, another Rwanda from another producer. And one of the producers had just passed away after we bought the coffee.
Oh, wow.
So it was his final harvest. And I was like, that's really moving. And the other one was a producer, which was his first harvest. So what I wanted to do was serve the judges this experience where they would have like the circle of life, to be cheesy, but like someone's final harvest, and then that kind of start of a new journey as an experience.
What a great story.
It was, yeah, I think about it, I'm like, oh, that was, probably I would have executed it into the win. I think I was top 6. I think I was 6th that year for that one. So I was like, okay,
Nice.
It's a good experience. Yeah. Yeah.
Would you say competition has opened doors for you and sort of shaped the path of your career?
I think it has, but maybe not in the most conventional way. So on one hand, yes, when I started competing, people started to kind of like get to know me a bit more because, you talk about things you care about. But more so, I think it had to do with my development of my own craft, my passion towards it, and my knowledge, right? Because ultimately now what I do is very multifaceted. I've worked across the whole of the industry. I worked in everything from green to roasting to barista, all of the things, right? Training. But that whole journey partially has been out of the passion for my own learning. And so it's actually, I think, the journey of learning that competition has brought that has carved that out. And so because of that, I end up knowing a lot about different things and then pursuing that knowledge and wanting to know more. In terms of like maybe a particular job opportunity, less so, because I think I worked for companies who were like, that's cool if you want to compete, but it wasn't like their centerfold in any way, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was spending a lot of time, just like I'd go and I'd do like 50 hours a week, and then I'd finish and I'd kind of like prep. And that's basically how my competition career has been. So that's actually, to be clear, even in 2017, when I did 9 competitions or 10 or whatever it was, I was not doing those during work hours. I was doing those like at 5:30, 6 o'clock until 10 p.m. right, every day or on the weekends. But what that's done has made me actually highly productive. So I think in terms of that, it means also careers opened, right? Because it means you're able to like learn a lot, get really like focused on a lot of fields. And as a result, you can expand your opportunities. You can take higher, kind of like more difficult positions. You're not as afraid to like jump in on something you're not fully sure about, right? Which, yeah, I'll be honest, we already know that, for example, a lot of us as women say, kind of, we have a habit of like thinking if we don't know it like 120%, we might not pursue it, right? So that's kind of removed that for me. So if I'm like, okay, I won't say something if I don't know it's 100%, but I'll try it if I think I'm like 70%. Yeah. So that's been good. And then the people, I think it's the community of people that I've met that probably has networked me through to new opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. Networking's a huge aspect of competition. Like from any part, like where you stood around waiting to compete, you're chatting with other people in the room, whether it's backstage. And this year, like on semi-finals day, there were people like prepping for Brewers Cup at the same time, and so you get a chance to taste somebody else's coffee, and it's you build so many relationships through doing it.
100%. And that's where sometimes collaborations come in the future, or someone's at a company that's looking for someone that's something interesting. And you know what I mean? I mean, ultimately, when I was at Taylor Street, that was an interesting thing because I met Andrew Tully because he judged me like in 2014, right?
Yeah.
And so there's part of that, like he kind of met me through comp, right? I'm sure there's an aspect there that was like, oh yeah, this is like, she's competed many times. Like I know Diana through this, you know what I mean? So there's a bit of the networking there, right? Like with different people going on into endeavors. And it's also why you should always like never burn bridges and always like keep good relations. And that's in comp particularly important because it's a heated kind of environment, it's intense environment. Sometimes people might get frustrated or annoyed in the moment, right? And sometimes it's good to remind yourself, like zen yourself, because right now you're feeling high energy and that's okay. But you want to keep good relationships with people because we're a small industry and, and it's important, right?
Yeah, such a small industry. All those little connections matter because you never know who, like, one day you might be working with, and then a few years later, they could be hiring for a position that you'd really love to have, right?
Exactly. And I know it. All of us know it. Like from competition perspective, you get your scores back or you get something, you feel down, you feel frustrated, and you're like, oh, and you want to get angry. And like you might, and like as a judge, you also understand that, right? Like one of the things we teach judges, like, okay, when you go back out there to debrief, understand that there's going to be a lot of emotion because they've really worked really hard on this, right? So just try to remove yourself from the perspective of them kind of being upset at you and understand they're just upset right now, and that's a really good way to think about it. But ultimately, two people, whether you're a judge or a competitor, in that moment of kind of heightened emotion, it can go one way or the other, right? It can go in a way that's like a really great conversation and both parties are like, yeah, okay, right now, like maybe I need to like give myself a day or two to relax and then we'll be able to take this in. Or it can go the other way. And to like navigate your self towards not going the other way, I think is really the best way forward. Or, you might end up later on going, oh, I can't take that job interview. Yeah.
Amazing. Obviously you're up to a million things always one time. But what's next for you? What are you looking forward to? What are you working on? What big things are happening?
So actually it's quite cool. In where are we? October. So beginning of November, I'm releasing a collaborative roasted pack with Saint Espresso. So basically what it is, I was talking with the roaster there, the head roaster, his name's Adam, really lovely guy, and we're having a chat about it. And it was like also with James Weiss, who's involved in this collaboration. And it was like, okay, so what would be really cool was actually to like add value to an experience for a consumer or from a coffee professional's perspective that would allow someone to understand how like roast impacts the cup, like the roast profile, not the roast color, because we know that one a bit more. And so I wanted to do something where it wasn't like blatant. So because I could pick something like a anaerobic kind of super funky coffee, and then I could obviously roast it two ways and very easily show you intense differences just because I could, go in the direction of making one kind of white subtle and one really wild, right? Really obvious stuff. But we didn't want to do that. We wanted to pick something that was a little bit more like the consumer would enjoy it in general, like average person could enjoy it, but it was very high quality. And that actually just allowed you to experience the subtleties of a roast profile. So this project, we're going to probably do the pre-release on the 7th of November. And then we'll do it'll go out the weekend after Manchester Coffee Festival, right?
Nice.
Kind of idea. And that's going to be a double pack. I have like a mock-up actually. It's not perfect, but it's like this. It's cute.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And the idea is it's called Double Dip. And the idea is it's a Brazilian coffee. It's a really high scoring Brazilian coffee we got from Sensible, and, lovely, lovely stuff. But obviously, as we know, like a high quality Brazilian coffee is a very balanced coffee. You've got your kind of nuts, you've got your like fruits, but it's not like something crazy. So what I've done is I've roasted on two of the profiles that I used in the competition. So I've taken two curved shapes, let's put it that way, that are contrasting. One of them that's more traditional style, And the other one, in terms of the shape, it's called a double dip because it literally looks like a double dip. And it's one of the ones I used in the comp. So every time I show someone that curve roaster, they're like, what the heck?
Yeah.
And it's really fun to show other roasters this curve. So that's the one that's used, and then the traditional one. And the idea is that you'll get like a double pack. So you get 100 grams of each. And so you can actually taste how those two simple shapes of curves impact. Now, obviously, I've roasted on a Gießen, so I've also done some fun stuff around the kind of like drum speed. But the coffees are the same drum speed. So you have the same drum speed with the shape of the curve difference here. But in general, even if you took this coffee and roasted it, the drum speed is different than usual. So it's going to be fun. I'll probably write up a little post on it just to give a bit more insight on the actual curves and the thinking, because they were all part of the way that I went to comp, which was to take a curve shape, 3 curve shapes through, and use the ones that I thought made sense on the day. So it's kind of taking that through. And so, yeah, that's probably the biggest exciting project at the moment. At that, and then I've also just launched a leadership training within Sane Espresso. So I've been taking like the kind of site leads, kind of head baristas, and then like the cluster managers through a new leadership training, which includes like not just like coffeenomics is a term, but also like soft skills. So things like coaching skills and like psychology, a lot of psychology and soft skills that I feel like in my experience within hospitality, many businesses unfortunately haven't been able to give to their teams. And I feel like the impact is huge on leadership, and leadership is core for a team to feel like positive and proactive and happy at work. So I'm trying to kind of do that. So those are the 2 big projects right now for me.
Amazing.
Yeah.
2 great things.
Exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. Was there anything that you wanted to talk about? Anything you wanted to mention that we didn't bring up? Anything you had on your mind?
I mean, I guess the other things like really just, watching the space in the next year, because obviously we're towards the end of the year. The double dip will be in November, which is great timing for Christmas as well. It's a limited edition thing. That's fun if you're into like tasting different things. Actually, by the way, the subtleties on those coffees, the differences are not going to be things like one tastes like strawberry and one tastes like, like, I don't know, guavas. It's more like textural and like more like complexity level. So that's fun. Obviously the leadership and training thing's cool, but then also with Sense at London, I think that's probably something quite cool, because we're coming towards that point in the year where it's towards the end of the year. I'm getting now to the stage where I'm like, I need to build the site, put up a website fully. I have like a landing page at the moment that like collecting, information, people chat, so I can get in touch with people and communicate, but we'll be building out a site and putting up like some of the courses that I'm going to do there, which obviously are the SCA courses that I'm doing for people at the moment, but also looking at branching out and building in from the beginning of next year some consumer focused courses, because I think it'll help our industry with more access to knowledge for the general consumer.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, what I'm hoping for, so if anyone's actually interested in getting involved, get in touch, is to start from next year doing a few events within the Sense at London space. So collaborative events with different people, different things happening. I'd love to be able to host everything from cuppings to like, even if it's not coffee and it's like beer, it's like wine or chocolate or whatever, and start getting the community together and creating that hub that I wanted to create with Sense at London.
Amazing.
So, yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much for spending over an hour chatting with me about coffee competitions and stuff. It's been great.
It's been absolutely wonderful. I have no more coffee.
Oh, perfect timing then.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Speak to you soon.
Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Hello Judges. It was great to chat with Deanna about her experiences and what it's like to be a judge. Next week, my guest is Sierra Yeo. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and review the podcast. You can also follow us on @TaylorsDiscovery on Instagram, Taylor's Discovery on YouTube, and Hello Judges Podcast in all the podcast places. It's been an absolute pleasure to share this podcast with you today. Thank you. Time.